Hi there. I recently watched a video by Thomas Anton Geurts. If I'm pronouncing his name incorrectly, I apologize. He does amazing cutting boards, absolutely phenomenal designs. And the one that I was watching wasn't a cutting board, but a bowl, and he calls it his butterfly hexagon bowl. It consists of a whole bunch of hexagon pieces that are joined together by butterflies made with dovetail bits. And it got me thinking, I'd like to challenge myself a little bit. So I came up with a design, which is basically a bunch of hexagons, almost looks like a beeswax. Anyway, I wanted to make a bowl with hexagons, and I made this test piece. I found out it's a little more difficult than I was thinking. Not only do the angles have to be precise, but the dimensions, there are 3 parallel dimensions here, and they all have to be absolutely precisely the same. So this one didn't work out quite as well as I was hoping it would. It was just a test, it's a prototype, but it let me know that I have to be a little more precise. So this is going to test my woodworking abilities and my turning abilities. What I want to do is use both walnut and birch and have rings of the different colored woods and then turn a bowl from them. So I'm going to try to put that together now, and I'll take you along on the voyage. If you want to see how it's done, stick around. Thanks for coming in. I have the birch and the walnut milled to the same thickness, and a test piece is also the same thickness. It's not the same in this dimension because this is going to be the thickness of the blank. It doesn't need to be the same. I'm just going to mark it on this face for the hexagons, and I'll take care of that now. The first thing I want to do is find the exact center, and I'm going to use my T rule for that. It's reading at 1 40/64, 104/64, so half of that would be 52. I'm going to mark it from both sides just to be sure that that's right. And the line does line up, so that is the center. Now I'll try to keep my big fat fingers out of the way here. I'm going to use this Draftsman's protractor, try to line it up right on the end, and draw this 60-degree angle off just a hair. I guess that's all right because when I put it on the table saw, I'll allow for that. Now I'll turn this over and draw this angle. My next step is to measure the length of this piece right here, this line. My most accurate measuring tool I have is my T rule. It's in 64ths, and as near as I can tell, that's 60/64 or 15/16 of an inch. What I want is to have that exact measurement here, but I'm going to go a little beyond that. I'm going to mark that at 1 inch. Now I will mark my 60-degree angles in here. I'll take it to the table saw. I'll cut these. This should be a little too long, and then I will sneak up on that measurement. I drew a line across at 90 degrees on that 1 inch mark I made. Then I drew my 60-degree angles. I measured from here to where they cross, and it's just under 2 inches. So I've drawn a line at 2 inches, and that's where I'm going to cut this off. Then I will start working on the angles. I had intended to cut all these pieces to length on the table saw, but then I realized that once I have the table saw blade set to the 60 degrees, I'm not going to want to change it until I'm completely finished. So I'm going to cut all these pieces on the miter saw. I have a stop set here to get them all the same length, and I'll cut this first one now. I used a machine square to set the blade to precisely 90 degrees to the table. Then I've set my tilt box to 0 degrees, and I'll now adjust this until it's at 30 degrees exactly. That's showing 30 degrees. Now I'm going to use that protractor to double check that it's 60 degrees on the other side of the blade. That's looking as close as I can possibly make it. Now I'll have to do some cuts to test it. Now I've got it set right on the edge of the line. I'm going to cut it through, flip it to do this part, and then turn it end for end and start to tweak it, moving it in until it gets the exact length I want. I'm going to try the other end and check it. So I want to make some pencil marks to make sure I remember which sides were down. Now, using my calipers to check this, this is the original width, and these two are slightly larger. So I need to move this in just a little bit. I'm going to move it in a hair, do a cut, and keep checking until I get it right, and then I'll be back. I've numbered all of the walnut pieces, not just to make sure I get them back in the same order, but because I want to make sure that the grain orientation goes the same way. I don't want to inadvertently turn one part way and have the grains not matched up. So now I'll just move these out of here and glue the first two pieces together. It's going to be these two, and I'll put this one in there when I clamp it, just to make sure that the joints are closed up properly. If the first one is not perfect, I can pretty well forget about the rest of it working out. To re-glue it. There is not a great deal of open time on this glue. I don't have a lot of time to get it right. make sure this is wet so the glue doesn't stick. I believe that's got it. I'll just let this dry for a while. I don't want it moving on me. I'll let it dry. Next step, I'm going to glue 2 and 6 in position. Don't see any gaps, they're closed up nicely. This is what's going to take a long time. I want to let this dry now before I go to the next step. I'll be doing that same thing over and over, a few pieces at a time. My next step will be to put 3 and 5 in. Now 5 fits very nicely. 3, however, I don't know if this is going to show up on the camera, but the point of this angle is slightly proud of this. To correct that, I need to sand this surface enough to get that brought down. There's also a bit of a gap right here, and by sanding this off, I'll slowly make it wider as it comes down, and then it should fill that area as well. So that'll be my next step. For sanding this, I have taken a 6" by 48" sanding belt, cut it so that I could glue it down on a sheet of glass. I've got 100 grit on this side and 150 grit on the other side. Now the trick is to keep this very flat and use smooth strokes. I'll check it frequently to see when the marks have been removed. This is going to take a little time, and then I'll be back. And now with that sanding, 3, 4, and 5 are fitting very nicely. So I'm going to glue these on, and I'll come back. Well, that's what I've got finished so far. All the walnut pieces are glued up. Once I get the birch glued up around the outside, it should look even better. It's not perfect even so far, but I've never made anything perfect in my life. I'm not going to subject you to watching all of the rest of the gluing. It's just a matter of continuing the process until they're all on, and then I'll be back. And there it is, all glued up. I'm fairly happy with it. It is not perfect. There are a few gaps showing in places, but all in all, I quite like it. It was a lot of work, so I'm certainly not going to throw it away. And here's a surprise for you. I've changed my mind again. Oh my goodness. I was going to make a bowl. In fact, I was going to put it on the bandsaw and cut all these protrusions off, just make a round bowl. But I've decided I kind of like the looks of it. So what I want to do is I'm going to take it to the bandsaw, I'm going to resaw it in half, make 2 pieces out of it. I'll put those through the drum sander to clean up both sides of everything. And then I'm going to do some kind of wall art. Still to be determined. So stick around and let's see what comes next. quite pleased with the way they're looking so far. I have the finest sandpaper for my drum sander is 220 grit, so I've sanded it to that. There's a couple of gaps, there's one right about there, one right about there that you can see quite evidently. I hope to be able to fix them up, but I'm going to turn first and then see about filling them. So the next step is to put them on the lathe. I'm going to use a glue block and hot glue to put them on. So let's go to the lathe and see what happens next. I'm going to try something I haven't tried before. I'm going to try turning this on my coal jaws. Now, I've only got 2 of these retainers that are fitting between these blocks. And I'm sure there are people going to be out there saying, don't do it, it's going to be dangerous. Well, I don't know if I don't try. And I have the tailstock brought up. It's just 1/16 of an inch off of the wood. In case things decide to leave the coal jaw, it should hold them in place well enough to not be dangerous. I'm going to be using my 3/8 inch bowl gouge. It's ground at 45 degrees. It's my favorite bowl gouge, basically because of that grind. It's a fingernail grind. And let's do this and see what happens. I'm going to be turning it at 750 RPM. I really like to turn real fast, but I don't trust the coal jaws to not come apart if I get any more speed than that. I'm going to start by making a pencil line, just to give me an idea where to start, and I may come out further as this progresses. Once I have my gouge in position and it starts to cut, I don't watch the tool. I watch over here to see how the cut is being formed. I find it much easier than concentrating right here. You can see the line coming down much better. I think the coal jaws are holding pretty well. I'm going to move them out of the way now and come from the center down in here. I want to make a bit of a hollow down here. I'm going to be cutting from the center down. If I try cutting down into a hollow and then back up, this is what I'll get because I'm going against the grains. Coming down from here into the hollow, I should get a much cleaner cut. Yes, it is much nicer. Not too bad. I will certainly need some sanding, but that's not too bad. I'm having an internal battle with myself whether I want to try forming this over this way. It'd be very easy to get jagged edges, knocking these corners off. I think I'm going to go with the nothing ventured, nothing gained theory again and try it and see what happens. This is one of those instances where more speed would be a very desirable thing. But I have to balance between safety and trying to get a clean cut, and the cuts look pretty good. Not complaining at all there. So far I'm only hitting the furthest ones out, not hitting these at all yet. I think that's what I'm looking for. Just a little bit of a curve to this. I'm going to go back in and try to clean this up. Going with the old theory that sometimes less is more, I'm going to stop right there. I'm going to see what I can do about some of these gaps. Using this hacksaw blade, which is quite thin, has allowed me to get in there far enough to remove enough of the glue squeeze out that I may be able to get some wedges in there after all, at least in some of these. I have 6 wedges that I've cut to fill these spots. There's 4 birch and 2 walnut. Now I need to glue those in place. I'm going to put a little bit of tight bond glue on the end of a sharp toothpick. Try to get it in here without getting too much around the outside. And then I'm going to tap it in. Once I get the wedge tapped in there a little bit, one thing I do not want to happen is to have it break off. If it does, there's a pretty even chance it'll break off below the surface. That would not make me very happy. So I will let the glue dry, and then I will trim it off with a sharp chisel. And when these are finished, I'll be back. The glue is dry now, and I'm going to try using a very sharp detail chisel to take these down flush with this surface. I don't want to go lower. These are not in very deep, so I'm going to hope to clean this up with just sandpaper. This is going to take me a little time. I have to do it very carefully. I'll be back when I have finished this. Now with those trimmed off, there are a number of smaller gaps that I can't fill with wedges. I'm going to mix up a bit of birch sawdust with yellow glue and pack as much as I can in there, let it dry, and then I'll get around to sanding this. I have all the gaps filled about as well as I can, I believe. Now I'm going to sand all of this. I have to start with about 100 or 120 grit. Some of this glue is pretty coarse on here. I won't subject you to all of that sanding. This is going to take me quite a while. I'm going to have to sand these outer pieces by hand without it spinning because I want to stay with the grain. I'll be back in a while. This is my sanding sealer I'm putting on now. It's 50/50 methyl hydrate and Zinsser seal coat. I'm quite happy with how this has turned out. These wedges do show up, but if you're not looking for them, they're really hard to find. So I'm quite pleased with it so far. I'm going to put this sanding sealer on, a couple of coats. I'll let it dry between coats and sand at 400 grit or 600 grit between the two coats. Then I'm going to put a finish on there. I'll be back when I finish with the sanding sealer. Now I'm going to apply the finish, which is equal parts of shellac, boiled linseed oil, and lacquer thinner. To buff this, I like to turn it up to a very high speed because it's a friction polish, and I'm not going to be able to do that in the coal jaws. So I'm just going to apply it, and then later I will use my 3-wheel Beal buffing system to buff this. For now, I just want to apply the finish. After this has had time to dry, I'm going to reverse it in the coal jaws and do some work on the back side. I'll be back when it's ready to do that. I'm going to drill a 15/16 inch recess for my logo coin. When I drill, I always like to turn the speed down to about 250. Too much speed can overheat the bit. That's not good for the bit, and it's not good for the wood. That'll be for the logo coin. Now I'm going to use the point of my skew chisel to put a couple of decorative lines in. I'm just going to do some light sanding in those decorative circles where it's scratched out a bit, and then I'll consider the backside finished once I put the logo coin in. Well, I'm pleased with this so far. The only thing I have left to do is to sand these edges. I'll have to do those with the sanding block by hand. I'll clamp this somehow so that I can do that. Then I'll take this, put it on the buffing wheel on the lathe, and buff the front and the back, possibly these, but they might tear up the wheel a little, so I'll have to give that a try. I'm not sure what to do. Then I've got a second one. Not sure what I want to do with this one. Sometimes my best ideas come from not really thinking about something, but just letting my subconscious work on it. So I'll let this one just sit for a while until I figure out what I want to do with it, and come back to it at another time. So I'm going to do this sanding, and then I'll take it over to the lathe and show you how I'm buffing it. I'm going to buff this now. I've taken 2 of the wheels from the buffing system off so that I have room to maneuver around here. One thing I learned the hard way is to buff from the center down. Because the wheel is spinning in this direction, if you try buffing the edge, it'll whip it out of your hands. So I will be buffing it, turning it, and just doing from the center down. I'm going to be buffing at 3,000 RPM, about the only time I ever use that speed, and I'll put some carnauba wax on the buffing wheel as well. Not sure if it's going to show up on the camera, but I can definitely see a difference where I've buffed it. It's looking very nice. So I'm going to continue, buff the rest of this. I'll buff the back as well. I'm going to give a little effort to doing the sections in here. I don't know how that's going to turn out. And then I'll be back. And there's another project complete. I quite like it. You can see the little wedges, particularly on the birch. It's not great, but I like it. And maybe you can do better. If you decide to follow my example and try something like this, send me a picture. Let me know what you've done. I've got a second one, and I'm not sure what I want to do with that yet. Sometimes I get my best ideas not by thinking, what should I do, but just letting my subconscious roll with it, and I'll come up with something in the future. I got a comment recently from Mac. Mac told me he did not like the fact that I put in my videos the speed that the thing is running at. If I'm doing some turning, I don't want it to be a 2-hour video, so I'll speed it up to 4 or 5 times. If you don't like it, please let me know. But if you do like it, let me know there as well, because if the majority say they don't like it, I'm going to go with that and I'll stop doing it. So in the next video, I'll go with the consensus. Please give me your vote, what you would like. Well, thank you for joining me for this one. I hope you enjoyed this. Have a great day in your shop. Be safe. Don't forget to subscribe if you haven't done so. Take care now. Bye-bye.